All right, welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 13. I hope you guys enjoyed Thursday's episode with Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson. If you missed that, I highly recommend it. Talk to him about a lot of different things, about this season, about expectations around this season. Really enjoyed it. I think you guys will probably get a feel for just how down-to-earth and fun to talk to and how much he enjoys this thing, both on the field, off of it, and the opportunities that he's really worked for and earned. So that was a blast to get to do. I cover the Vikings via Athletics, so if you have not checked out the website, I've had a ton of stuff over there. On Wednesday, watch film with Harrison Smith, story from that. On Thursday, big profile of Sam Darnold and kind of how he's emblematic of why a lot of quarterbacks fail, and I really enjoyed putting that together, put a lot of work into that. You're probably listening to this on Friday, and so I also have a preview of the game Sunday with John Krasinski up at The Athletic, where we go back and forth, as we do every week, give predictions, and he cooks me every single week, so I enjoy that. But really fun guest for you today. It's Charlotte Carroll, good friend of mine, who covers the Giants for us at The Athletic. We were going to have both her and Dan Dugan, who do a great job on that team for us, but Dan had a little voice conundrum, I'll call it. So just Charlotte, but had a great time with her, talking through a lot of the Giants stuff and perspective, and should give you guys a pretty good feel for this team coming into the game. If you've listened to this podcast, if you read my stuff, and then if you listen to Charlotte, I think you guys are probably like, Alec, we're ready to roll. So it should be fun. As I just, I think I had a meltdown there on the mic, which is always good. But going to take a couple questions because I asked for them earlier this week and hadn't brought you guys some of the answers. And I'll make this pretty quick, and then we'll hop right into Charlotte so that I don't ruin your entire afternoon or evening or car ride or walk or wherever you're listening to this, work site, wherever you're listening to this. So I'll just hop right into it. And some of these will be fun, some will be hardcore. Vikings fan page, who I've seen a lot on Twitter. They do a good job. They bring a lot of the news to a lot of the fans, and I've seen some of the players tweet their stuff. So I'm asked, you play fantasy football, ? And if so, which Vikings do you draft? I play. When I was young, when I was really young, I used to love it. Like, my parents could attest. I was probably not doing homework, and I was on fantasy football and trying to figure out how I could trade for Peyton Hillis. Like, that is the realm in which I used to operate. But I play. I'm in 2 leagues now, one with some home friends that I've been in for more than a decade, one with some college friends from Mizzou, and I'm not good. I'd like to think I draft well. The ratings don't give me the A+ or whatever, but it's because, you see things differently. You hear things, and so you add some different players. But then I don't look at it throughout a season. So, I set my lineup. I'm not one of those guys, but I'm not good at picking up guys and being real active. But the other question, if so, which Vikings did you draft? I don't know what I can say here, like from an objective journalist, Big J, hardcore, a sports writer standpoint, but I'll just be totally honest. TJ Hawkinson is a snag in both leagues because you can get him late, and I think whether he returns in week 5 and week 7, wherever around that time span he comes back, I think he's going to be productive. So he's one. Aaron Jones at running back, I think depending on the amount of touches and what the run, the blocking, the scheme, all that looks like, I think he could have a really, really good year. So he's another one. There's not really a stay away from. Like, I'd take a shot on Darnold really late. I would draft Justin Jefferson if it presented itself. Jordan Addison, same situation. So, I think the Vikings have a ton of guys that make a lot of sense, and I don't get paid to say that. I don't have to say that. If they didn't make sense, I would be very frank with you, but that's what I'll say. Appreciate the question. Noah at 71 Babylon 71. Favorite place to eat here? This is one of my favorite questions. I'm not sure if we've already had it. I've probably given this answer already because I love really good food. I'm pretty bougie, so that's going to come across, which might not surprise you considering I'm sitting here with gelled hair. But my favorite place without question is Sanju-san. Italian-Japanese fusion. It's probably not for everybody, but it is an awesome vibe. They have one of the best playlists at a restaurant I've ever heard in my whole life. If I could choose like who sponsors the podcast, they'd be a top 5, like without question. If you know the owner there, if you know a way to get me free food there, be able to bring friends and host the people, I'm all in. I'm all in for it. So that's a spot. I mean, I give you some honorary mentions. Runyon's Wings, a must for me. Monte Carlo Wings, I love. Man, I could go on for a long time. I really could. But Sanjusan is the first. I mean, Bar La Grasse is incredible. But again, I'm getting back into the bougie territory, and I'm going to try to keep my brand seem more layman's person than that. I think that's I just use the phrase "my brand," which makes me sick anyway. But we move on. JJ Stan at Connor LC247. Favorite pastime to do in Minnesota? I love playing golf. It blew me away how much people here love playing golf. I don't get out as much as I think I'd love to, but it's just the nature of it. So that, and then bounce around the North Loop, have a good time some of these nights. So that's what I would say. Those are two things I like doing when I'm not working, which is typically often. Let's see here. JT Thomas. Do we think that coaching and management are pulling the trigger too soon on some of these drafted players and not allowing for them to develop? I love this question because I covered baseball for 3 years, as you guys probably know, and you guys are probably like, why is this relevant? Well, in baseball, player development is such a massive advantage for some of these teams. The Cleveland Guardians, the Tampa Bay Rays, even the Yankees, like their pipeline and not only how they draft, but how they develop, it's huge. But unlike baseball, you don't get 3 years of minor league runway. And unlike baseball, the time span of these regimes is very quick. So pardon me, it's been an adjustment even for me. Like I remember the first year I covered this team, people were ready for Ed Donatel to be gone early. And I covered a Kansas City Royals team who had a pitching coach, Cal Eldred, who stayed for 5 years without any level of performance that warranted staying for 5 years. And so it's taken an adjustment for me. So when I first started this job, if you'd asked me, do you think they're pulling the trigger too early? I probably would have said yes. But the reality is this is such a it's the NFL is like society. It's like there is no patience. You need answers. You need production now, and that's just how this sport really is. And I don't really blame them for moving on from certain players like Lewis Seen and Andrew Booth Jr., who I think you have a guy in Brian Flores as defensive coordinator who evaluates guys at the highest level from a defensive perspective. And if he views it as like, I don't really know how these guys fit in the long term, then to me that it's tough, but that's just how it is. Minnesota North Star at North Stars NHL. Will Brett Ripien really be much more successful than Hall if it came to that? I have no idea. But I do know that to me, that decision in terms of moving off from Jaron Hall and going with Brett Ripien, it's three-pronged. There's a lot that goes into it. I first want to say that Jaron Hall did develop, and he was performing well in the preseason. But it just was the preseason, and he's facing third string defenses, four strings at times. And so you guys might be sitting here, but Alec, Brett Ripien's never done anything in real games. You're right. There's no question he's struggled, but he has played more and he has the experience. And I went back and I watched, because I'm a sicko, the preseason Hall of Fame game he played against the Chiefs. And I watched every snap of him in that game, and I thought his arm strength probably is a level that Jaron Hall is not. If you ask him to point and shoot, I think he can do that. I think he's probably a little more athletic than people would give him credit for. Not as athletic as Jaron Hall, but he also might not be as injury prone as Jaron Hall. So there's a lot of factors to it. I also would not underrate the amount of insight that can be gleaned from a guy who was in the quarterback room of a division rival with a budding quarterback and a new system. And Brett Ripien is a guy who you could tell even watching in Hard Knocks, like the staff had respect for him. He probably had a really good feel for that team, what they do, the signals, the offensive infrastructure. And I just wouldn't underrate the value that it would have to the Vikings, kind of like when they brought in David Blau 2 years ago to kind of be able to understand very well a division opponent and what they're thinking about. And Kevin O'Connell's a guy who, I mean, I remember I did a story in 2022 where I talked to former teammates of his with the Jets, and they would talk to me about like how much he would pepper guys that they brought in from the practice squad, even back then when he was a player, to try to get any bit of intel they could. And so that with Brett Ripien, I just wouldn't underrate that as a factor. Last one here, and then we'll jump into Charlotte Carroll. But Carl from Lake Elmo, he asked, undrafted free agents first to draft, why success in one area and not the other? You know, it's two totally different entities. The draft is kind of it's a fixed situation where, you know, you pick who you prefer, whereas undrafted free agent, it's a lot like college recruitment. Like the draft ends and these coaches are on the phone with guys trying to convince them that their spot and their program and their organization is the best one for them. And so that's a lot of it. Now, I'm going to shift this question into a totally different kind of response than maybe Carl was looking for. But I just want to say that I think there has been a clear line of demarcation in terms of what this Vikings regime values in the draft from 2022 to 2023, and from when Ed Donatel was here defensively to Brian Flores. I think there is much more emphasis now put on ball skills, processing, production, as opposed to traits and athleticism and maybe what a model would say. And also just like the makeup of the guys. I think they are making sure that signs are that everything is crossed away, T's are crossed, I's are dotted in that regard. But the ball skills and the competitiveness, like that to me, I mean, with Mekhi Blackman, that showed up as in a way that maybe it didn't with a Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth Jr. Ivan Pace, production, football intelligence, being able to kind of just see things on the field. And I'm not talking like smarts, like a guy answering questions on a test or listening well. I'm talking when you're on the field, can you react quickly? Can you see things? I think they have prioritized that at a level that they maybe, even with the Jordan Addison, at a level that they maybe didn't that first year. So that's what I'll say. That'll do it for the questions. Keep sending those at Alec_Lewis on Twitter or at Alec Lewis Show on Twitter. Anytime you got something, just shoot that over and I'll file it away and hopefully answer some on most of the podcasts we do. I like these to be very interactive. I want you guys a major part of it. If there's anything you guys think I should be doing, people I should be talking to, I'm always listening to that. Like and subscribe, please. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button right there. If you're on Apple, Spotify, you can find that. But without further ado, we will just jump right into it. Here is Charlotte Carroll, who covers the Giants with me at The Athletic. All right, Charlotte, welcome. Right before we got on here, kind of like hours ago, you were talking about the weather for Sunday. It's supposed to be amazing. Is this true?
I'm a true Midwest queen, so I cannot not talk about the weather. As of a couple hours ago, I looked at the weather. It was supposed to be like 70, partly sunny as like a high, which is perfect football weather. You know, I've been worried because the weather's been gorgeous that we'd get stuck with like a 90-degree day or like horrible rain, but knock on wood, everything's looking good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like coming to New York, I said this to you a couple days ago in our group chat with our good friends Mike DeFabo and Kevin Fishbane. But I said to them, I was like, New York is too big for me. Like, I can't. You grew up, like, you're in and around Chicago, but like the subways. We were already talking the other day, me and another beat writer, like, all right, how are you getting to the game? How can I tag along with you? It is very difficult for me. So the weather being good is a key aspect of me being able to get around and actually live and feel comfortable in New York, I think, for 2 days. So it's good to hear.
I shouldn't probably be saying this, but luckily the game's in Jersey, so that adds a little less to the New York intrigue. I know you're staying in the city, so that kind of changes things. But no, I love New York and the area. So, and the good weather makes it great.
Well, you and Dan Dugan do a great job covering the team for The Athletic, and because I am not an elite Giants mind, I thought I'd bring you on and kind of have you let us know what kind of the vibes are over there and what the expectations are. And I'll start like right there. Like, can you just Give me the vibe of what training camp was like over there, going back to maybe the spring. And I know last year I don't think it went the way a lot of people up there hope, but just what has this kind of stretch run leading up to the season been like in terms of how people feel about that team up there?
Yeah, I think it kind of just really depends on who you ask inside, internally. When you talk with the players, they're very positive about this team. They feel like a lot of them have said it's the best training camp that they've had, which is what you want to hear about players going in. But externally, you think about all of the expectations and the pressures that are going into Brian Dable and Joe Shane going into this year. It's a critical year 3 after they kind of over exceeded expectations with that playoff win back in 22. I think you remember that one. Maybe that's a little familiar to you.
A tad bit, and the viewers do too, and they're shaking their heads like, "Why did you bring that up?" But yeah,
I bring it up because it's so relevant to this Giants team, and I think there's a lot of people who've been cursing about, like, if only they didn't get to the playoffs that first year, the rebuild would have been more of a rebuild instead of kind of an accelerated, and then you have to kind of play catch up in 2023. They re-sign Daniel Jones, they bring back Saquon, franchise tag him, so things kind of change, and then it just goes south with injuries and the O-line playing really poorly last year, and they end up with 6-11, not enough to get one of the top quarterbacks, even though they were actively searching, as we all saw on Hard Knocks, and it's just been an interesting offseason. So we kind of go into this year of they need to win if they kind of want to stick around, I think, is kind of the overall expectation. And we were talking with Joe Shane and Brian Dable about those expectations and what they want, and that's to win. And John Mara has always said, I just want to walk off the field feeling better than I did at the start of the season.
You mentioned the offensive line, and I was going through some numbers on our True Media thing that we have, and I was like, how was that offensive line last year? And I like sorted all the spreadsheet, and it was like sacks given up 85, I think is the correct number, and it was like 20 more than the next team. So I guess, like, was the offensive line just that poor? Like, was it atrocious? And then what did they do to fix it? I said atrocious. I'm not saying you said that, but I just, like, what did they do to try to fix something that seemed like it was the obvious weak link of the 23 team?
I mean, atrocious is not the wrong word. 85 sacks that they allowed was the second most in NFL history. So I think that qualifies as atrocious. And the reason it was so bad is you have to look at the injuries that happened. Andrew Thomas got hurt in the very first game, and he's like their stalwart left tackle. So if he goes down, then you start playing musical chairs. Evan Neal was hurt. So he hasn't really had a chance. He was drafted in 22 to be, the starting right tackle. He's been injured his first 2 seasons, ended up suffering season-ending surgery. So that was kind of like threw things into a tizzy. And then just from there, that first game, they could not get it right. Daniel Jones gets hurt. He tears his ACL. He was also hurt on a sack where he suffered a neck injury and missed some time. So it was just such a mess. And that really kind of set things in the offense on a really poor path. So what they did this offseason, they fired Bobby Johnson, brought in Carmen Brasillo from Las Vegas. And then free agent wise, they bring in John Runyon, who's going to be playing left guard. They brought in Jermaine Illuminor, who right now is starting right tackle, and will be playing starting right tackle because Evan Neal just didn't get back enough in time to kind of earn his position back. Then they also brought in Greg Van Roten late, and he'll be playing starting right guard. And that actually, there's a lot of stability now on the line. There's 2 returning players who will be starting, Andrew Thomas and center John Michael Schmitz. So Jermaine and Greg Van Roten actually played together last year in Las Vegas. So there's some stability, familiarity, and
with
they
the
know
coach.
Carm too.
Yeah, with the coach.
Yeah.
Jermaine, what's the last name again?
Illuminor.
I was reading a lot about it, prepping a little bit, and I'm like, if I had to spell this guy's name every day, I don't know. It would be copy and paste, like a shortcut for me. I'm glad you said it because I had no idea how to pronounce it.
I definitely have to, and that's just something I've learned along the way. When I misspell someone's name, that's actually really simple. When I end up misspelling like Patrick or something dumb like that, always check the names and copy. I try not to miss it and try to be good, and then check on pronunciation too before I attempt to say it. And apologies if I always missay something.
No, I mean, honestly, when I saw that name, I'm like, we don't really have a ton of tough ones here. I don't believe so. No, I empathize with you on that on a very serious level. I mean, obviously, you mentioned the guys brought in. Like, do you feel like they will take a big step, a giant step? Like, do people there feel that way? What has kind of been the, I guess, the early returns without having faced an opposing team in a regular season game like they will on Sunday?
Yeah, I actually, the good thing about covering the Giants, good or bad, depending on your view, I find it good, is I've had to become an O-line kind of expert or connoisseur. And I've really enjoyed it. Like, I know that I've become a little O-line nerd, like not realizing how much it can screw with a team until last year, and just knowing the history and the context of how much it's messed with the Giants over the last decade and how difficult it has been to get it right. They think they've done a decent job. You talk with those in the building, they feel like they're kind of on the right path. They're kind of hopeful. The defensive line players are saying it's harder to do things this offseason or this training camp than it was last year. So it just, there's more communication. They just feel they're in a better spot. Talk with some analysts. I mean, truly, it can't be worse than last year. And so that's kind of like the saving grace, is like it can only go up in theory unless something really, really wrong goes bad or something really wrong happens. And competency would be like a step up. You're not asking for like a top, 5 offensive line in the league. You need to get away from last place. And, 5 places up from there, 25th would be golden.
I mean, listen to you talk. I'm like, well, if you want to get tested on what's possible, I'm thinking like Brian Flores and how they will pressure the quarterback is probably the strongest first test as you can find. I mean, I will say, though, like bringing in Brian Burns and having Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau, it is good. It's good preparation. But, I mean, looking at a lot of the numbers, like Shane Bowen typically liked rushing 4 men. And, like, that seemed to be, like, his approach. So I wonder how much from, like, a 6-man pressure, max pressure stuff they've done in training camp that they will probably face on Sunday against Brian Flores and the billion guys that he will send at Daniel Jones. So I guess it's like, all right, if we want to figure it out, here we go. It seems like an interesting first test.
Yeah, it's you said that right. Interesting first test. I think we'll know right away if this is working or if this is not. And, it's their first game. What's crazy, too, is like we talk about health derailing them last year. Camp was kind of hard. We didn't get the full starting line together until last week. So that's something, too, that they're, which I thought was interesting. I was talking with Andrew Whitworth about this for a story. It's not necessarily like they need a ton of time together, but they do need some to kind of gel and get the keys and all of that. So he didn't think it would take too long, but now they've had like a week and a half before the game. So hopefully that's enough time to gel, and we'll see if these veterans actually make a difference and they can keep Daniel Jones afloat.
I'll stay on offense really quick. You mentioned those 22, the 22 matchup in the wild card game and then the regular season one, like both of those games, I remember sitting up in the Vikings press box at US Bank Stadium thinking like like this guy is absolutely unbelievable. Like the way he was moving in that game, he was like hurdling guys. It was ridiculous. They obviously don't have him anymore. So I'm curious from a backfield perspective what their plan is without a guy who brought as much juice as he did there when he was healthy. Like what is their plan right now?
Yeah, no, they brought in Devin Motor Singletary. So with a name like Motor, you can't not be a running back. So he kind of led the Texans in this. He didn't have as many carries as Saquon Barkley did down in Texas, but the hope is that he can kind of bring up for that. They brought back Eric Gray is coming back. They brought back Dante Miller's on the practice squad. They drafted Tyrone Tracy Jr., who's a back and can kind of catch some passes too. So they have options. So I think it'll be a little bit more by committee, even though majority will still probably fall on Motor. But because they brought back Daniel Jones and, in theory with this revamped line, the focus will be more on throwing, and with Brian Daboll taking over play calling, kind of more akin to what he was doing in Buffalo when he had kind of control. So they've got Malik Neighbors, which I don't know if you wanted to talk about him, but it's kind of all focus right now in New York feels like it's on Malik Neighbors in terms of like hopefulness, when you're not thinking about Saquon as like this offensive weapon. It's kind of, you take that pressure off of Saquon because he's gone and you put it on the rookie Malik Neighbors, whether that's fair or not. But it's looking like that.
This is probably the first interview you've done since Neighbors was drafted where it took 11 minutes to bring him up. Is that correct? Like that has to be.
That might be a record. Like I do need to go back and actually listen because what I've done, but it feels like, and I'm surprised I didn't bring it up either.
No, I think, I was going to just slow play it. Like this guy, no, it's interesting. Like he's an LSU guy, absolute explosive incredible weapon. And I mean, I'm I'm an Alabama guy, so a big college football person. And he's ridiculous to watch in college. And it'll be very interesting to me. You got a guy on the other side in Justin Jefferson who had a ton of success from LSU in his rookie season. So if there is a platform or kind of like a vision for what you'd hope a guy like him could become, it's probably on the other side, though Neighbors has a different skill set. Like, I mean, I guess general, like, how do you expect, do you think, I mean, it's like 3-level routes down the field or like touches in the backfield? How do you think they will plan on using them as someone who hasn't seen them play at all yet? So it's a hard question to ask.
No, they've used him in a variety of ways already throughout camp, which has been exciting. And it's more than just like what you kind of would expect. So we're going to be seeing him a lot. He had the second most receptions from Daniel Jones, I believe, throughout training camp. Dan Duggan, colleague, is phenomenal at tallying everything up.
Yeah, I don't do that.
I've tried to take a page out of his book, and I do my best, but he is the go-to guy on the beat. So it's always, we're all checking, and he's usually, we go with him. So he tallies it up, keeps track. It was, I believe it was Darius Slayton who led the team. Don't quote me on that, would need to check. But then Malik Neighbors was second. So he is going to be a targeted player, and they're going to use him. We saw him in the preseason game get some action. He was Daniel Jones's first pass choice, almost intercepted. Trying to forget that part, but then he had a really good acrobatic catch on the sidelines in the second quarter that kind of just previewed what is to come from him. He is just, you watch him and you're like, okay, New York hasn't had this kind of a guy since Odell Beckham Jr. So that's been kind of the comparison. And I think kind of the thinking is Malik Neighbors can maybe be even more. So we'll see if that like pans out. Not saying from inside the building, but just like kind of, talk amongst town kind of a thing. So we'll see, but he's really good. And the part that's interesting too is he doesn't seem to be fazed by this in New York. And at least right now, externally, he's loving the moment. He's loving kind of the pressure. He's been talking a lot of like how pressure doesn't affect him. The Giants unretired a number with the permission of Ray Flaherty to give him number 1. So, I mean, I can't remember the last time I could remember that happening anywhere. I know we had an example in Giants history of that happening way back when, but just the pressure on this kid is enormous. I mean, you retire a player's number to give to him.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate receiver energy. If like you have the cachet to make that happen, I think
it's incredible. I mean, the confidence on the kid and the competitiveness. I did a long kind of in-depth thing on this out of LSU when he was drafted, and the competitiveness in this kid is wild. I mean, he will do anything to play, and he was in high school playing defensive end on the scout team just to kind of get reps in, and was doing that, anything he could to help out the team.
Sticking one more with the offense. I mean, Daboll, you mentioned it, but he is back the play caller and called plays in Buffalo and did a heck of a job. I am insane enough to where I went back to 21 when he was the play caller in Buffalo. And I wanted to see how the matchups went against Brian Flores when Flo was the head coach in Miami. And the Bills won both of those matchups. Now, obviously, they had Josh Allen. They had a bunch of skill players that the Giants do not have. But I thought, like, Brian Flores earlier this week was pretty outspoken in saying, like, he thinks Daboll is a really good offensive mind. There's a lot of crossover familiarity, obviously, from their history in New England. But what do you think about him, Brian Daboll, taking over play calling? Like, do you expect that to make a massive difference? How do you expect that to just alter maybe what they do offensively?
I think it'll like change, as we talked about. The error is going to be more important, I believe, like pass game. So we'll see what happens there. And with Daniel healthy, coming off the ACL, Dan Duggan, again, beat colleague, did a really good story on this morning. So you guys should check that out. He kind of went in depth about the play calling, because that's something Daboll's been it's been like this, I don't want to say secret, but like, unspoken secret. It's like since the spring, we knew it was going to happen. He was just like, playing it off until he finally confirmed officially this week. But Dan had been working on this for a while, talked with some former players about what makes him like just a really dedicated play caller. There's a great anecdote in the lead about how he, FaceTimes his players. I think it was from the jacuzzi. So just like coming up with the detailed planning of like what goes into this and how he kind of goes about it is really impressive. So definitely check that out and kind of get a sense of what's in his head.
No, I'm looking forward to reading that. And that sounds like the most Daboll thing ever, is like FaceTiming your player from the jacuzzi with like a cigar in your mouth. Like the way in Hard Knocks, watching them, like he's like sitting on the couch slouching. I mean, this guy, I'm like, there was the scene, I think, with them at the combine, and he was joking about something. I can't really remember the specific conversation, but it seems like a character in some ways to cover, and probably like seems like there's he can be kind of gruff at times, I'd imagine, in terms of press conference stuff. I could be wrong with that. That's my
I
impression.
mean, New England way. He was raised. That it came up in the New England kind of Belichick of press conference approaches. But I think his players like him. He does what he can to kind of relate to them, and he's a big FaceTimer.
Love it. How defensively, like how uncertain is this unit in general?
I think that's a great question because we don't really know the front four. There's so much emphasis has been placed on them. You bring in Brian Burns, you've got Kayvon, that great pairing on the edge. Then you have Dexter Lawrence in the middle to really kind of nail it home, who is just a monster and just gets after it. So that is like really solidified up front. It's the secondary that I'm concerned about. And so much so that the Giants added and brought back Adoree Jackson very late. Adoree has been, a 3-year vet with the Giants. They did not bring him back early this spring, kind of just left him. They didn't sign like a star veteran corner. They drafted a slot corner in Drew Phillips. They were unable, as we saw in Hard Knocks, to kind of get a corner with the second-round pick. They went with safety Tyler Nubin, who's looked decent. But then throughout camp, that's been the question mark of who is going to start opposite Deontay Banks. So it'd be Nick McLeod, Cordell Flott. Flott had dealt with injuries, so that was kind of up in the air a little bit too. So they finally brought back Adoree I don't even know what day it is anymore, like late last week. I think it's Thursday. Maybe there's a game Sunday. I know that much. I'll
Absolutely.
be there.
Yeah, no, it's just every day's a Wednesday. That's how it is.
It's so confusing. And it's a weird week with Labor Day. Their schedule's off, so I have no concept of time. But they brought back Adoree late. And so while I don't anticipate him starting this week, he's trying to get back into game shape, all that, there's a chance he could play. Also punt return a little bit. He was working there in practice. So that adds a little bit more depth and a little more veteran presence just in case.
You mentioned Deontay Banks, and I remember he was a guy before the 23 draft. The Vikings obviously drafted Jordan Addison in the first round, but Banks' name was like big time in conversations here. I mean, there's no question. I know they brought him in for a visit. Kevin O'Connell talked about that earlier this week. Competitive guy, Maryland corner. It's his second year. How much are they expecting of him, and like what have the reports been about what he might be capable of in this second year?
Yeah, I mean, they expect a lot. They need him to become a number one corner, and that's something I think we were talking with Brandon Brown like 2 weeks ago. That kind of came up of like, can he move into that? And they expect him, and I think he's ready for the challenge. And when you talk with Tay, that is something he wants. He's a very confident kid. And, the bank's closed is his phrase, which is just great. I mean, if I had that name, it's like Malik, too. I mean, the puns are endless with using the number one, too. I was the marketing team. Anyway, aside of, like, impressive puns. But Tay can move into that, and you want to see it. He kind of had a up and down camp. But, again, part of that might be with the, unsure part of, CB2. So he really needs to be solid for these guys to have success, especially if, the front four can't get it done.
You mentioned Nubin and John Michael Schmitz too. I mean, it's two Minnesota Golden Gophers, so it's kind of it's back-to-back years, right? They've taken Minnesota. This is like Minnesota North or something up there. Kind of interesting.
And they've got Carter Coughlin, I think, is Minnesota too.
That's correct. Special teams guy, right? Yeah. No, it's. I mean, a lot of these. There's a lot about these teams that, like, I just think it's similar because not similar, but it's just interesting to compare because. Like you said, Joe Shane and Brian Daboll both brought in 22, right? I think that's correct. And it's the same year that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell took over the regime here. And so to see, I mean, obviously the playoff game happened the way it did in 2022, and Ed Donatel ultimately got fired after that game. I think in that game, I went back and looked at this again because I am as big of a nerd as I am. And I think in that game, the Vikings used a 4-man pass rush 80% of the time. Last year, Brian Flores used a 4-man pass rush 30% of the time. So It's like as I mean, exactly as you'd expect, but as polarly different in terms of how they play defense from how they did in 2022, which makes this interesting.
Same with the Giants.
That's exactly right. It's like Wink Martindale. Obviously, he is like line them all up and let it rip, and Shane Bowen is like I don't really know if any of us know really what he is. So I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to that matchup, like Shane Bowen against Kevin O'Connell. I think that's very interesting.
yeah, no, I mean, we really don't know what it's going to look like. It's kind of like the kickoff return. How is that going to look? Like, just lots of questions, and how's Malik going to look? So it's fun for week one to finally get some answers of what everything looks like. Is the offensive line going to be competent? Is Daniel Jones going to look a little bit more improved and better decision making? So I feel like you just go into this with so many questions, and then you can finally like start digging in. So I'm very excited to finally play real football.
This
Not
is
me
as
personally,
this
but
yeah,
watch real football.
yeah, yeah, no, that's probably good. This is probably as in the weeds, and I'm gonna like every week I'm gonna ask this question of the person I bring on. Special teams, is there anything special teams wise that's interesting with the Giants that like people should know? Maybe not at all, maybe, but like I never think about it. And then on Sunday the punter's punting 70-yard punts, and I'm like, I should have probably known that guy exists. So I don't know.
Let's see. The wind in MetLife is always a topic of discussion.
Okay.
That's a positive. Right now, we might get lucky. I don't know what the wind is supposed to be. Didn't do that much in-depth looking at the weather report beyond the sun. Uh, they've managed to keep another kicker on their practice squad this year. Not that that really matters, but we've got a kicker from Ireland, Jude. I can't pronounce his last name, so I will not try. I did not look up the pronunciation, so apologies, Jude. But because of the kind of international rule, they're able to keep him on without it counting, kind of get some development behind Graham Gano, who's a league vet. So that's good for them. Graham is coming back too from an injury last year, so while he looks good, should be good to just get a younger guy, see what that looks like. Maybe for the future or not, but just to kind of have him there. I'm trying to think.
No,
So
I think that
I feel like no one really knows with special teams though this year is going to be so fascinating because of the kickoff return, and we've all tried to like examine and talk about it, but it's just going to be so different.
it's been crazy over here because I think a lot of the Vikings fans, and even I can even say myself, expected Kene Nwangu as a third string running back throughout training camp to be the guy returning kicks. He's returned 3 kicks for touchdowns in his career, and then he was cut. And so you had Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the GM, say that Myles Gaskin was going to be the kick returner. Then you've had the special teams coordinator, Matt Daniels, say that it might be Ty Chandler, Brandon Powell. So we didn't even know over here who's going to be doing it. My bet would still be Myles Gaskin, but we shall see. That play, it's just I haven't studied it probably how I need to. I might do that within the next couple of days, but it's going to be so odd seeing it, I think.
Yeah, I need to go back. We had a little bit of time with some refs ahead of I don't even know, a couple weeks ago. So, but some of the stuff might be outdated at this point of just like what they're paying attention to, what the concerns are. When you guys were talking with your guys, did they kind of say what they're prioritizing in like their returner? Because I think that was something that came up this week with our special teams coordinator, Gobi. I think if I'm remembering this correctly, speed, or like quick cut. That's actually, I'm quoting that wrong, but definitely like obviously ball security. That was like the number one thing for them, which I think is the case for everyone. But
it's interesting here. I think physicality of that play is like something they've really thought about. And obviously part of the introduction of the play, I think from a league-wide narrative opinion standpoint, is like that it will eliminate or help to eliminate as many injuries on that play. And I think the Vikings feel like just given the certain angles, like it might be physical in a totally different way. So again, it'll be very interesting. I'll get you out of here on this. Let you go.
No. I was just looking to see if I could look up what it was, so I didn't.
You're
say
good.
It wrong.
You're good. I just I'm not going to make you make a prediction, but if the Giants win this game on Sunday, like what do you think the reasons behind that will be? Maybe like what do you think you will have to see for the Giants to come out of this game having won it at home, obviously, in what I expect to be a pretty raucous atmosphere, even if it's beautiful and not snowing?
Definitely offensive line. I think, as we've talked about with the Brian Flores defense of just like what he can throw at a team, and you just need to see this O-line be successful because that was such a down point and a turning point downward last year against the Cowboys in the opener. It was such a mess. So I'm looking at the O-line, how Daniel looks. I know that's very cliche, but that kind of goes hand in hand. And then the secondary too. I think that's a little bit more lesser end of O-line for me. But I do think they need to kind of hold up their end of the bargain. Can they not let a bunch of long kind of touchdown plays or long plays go? But it's definitely O-line and Daniel. And then I think for everyone, we're going to Malik of like, what does he look like? Not necessarily like that he needs to be hugely successful, because they do have a pretty like more, that's the big thing is bringing him in. Their wide receiver core is deeper this year. But can he be that guy so quickly and have the MetLife Stadium screaming out leak and him doing his touchdown dances so early?
Do they still have Isaiah Hodgins?
He's on the practice squad this year, actually.
That guy, I can't remember how many catches he had in the 22 games, but I remember thinking, like, who the hell is Isaiah Hodgins? It's like, it made no sense to me. He was just torching Patrick Peterson and the entire group. So I guess
that's just how crazy that 22 year was. Is Hodgins came in mid-year. They brought him in from like the Buffalo, and it was because familiarity with Dable. And then he ends up being like their go-to guy through the end of the season. They make the playoffs. That was a fever dream at this point. It feels so like insane and so long ago.
Yeah, there is no question. It's been a wild ride. I mean, here to be Sam Darnold, like you mentioned, watching Daniel Jones, and you said like cliche, but it's not. I mean, it's like here, Sam Darnold. I mean, you have expectations. I think this system, the skill players, all of that, we've talked about it ad nauseum. But like, we'll see. We will see Sunday. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully it is sunny and beautiful like you described. I didn't look at the weather. Like the people who know me know it's like a night before. I'm throwing stuff in the suitcase and I'll let it rip. But no, it should be fun. I'm excited to get out there.
I hope you don't become Kevin McAllister and get lost in New York. We'll make sure that doesn't happen.
100%. I will be. Yeah. I don't know. Like I need to like make a list of stuff I should do Saturday other than just like find some bar to watch college football. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's not. I'm too small town for this. Like, I don't. It's gonna be. I don't know. It'll be interesting.
All right, I'm sending you my list of recs because we can't allow you to just park at a bar and watch college football when you're literally like, you need to enjoy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll Central Park. I'll go on a run and get hurt or something. Yeah, that sounds this is par for the course. No, Charlotte, thanks for hopping on. I appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you and Dan out there Sunday and seeing the game and finally analyze something that's not projection. So it should be fun.
Yay, football.
And that'll do it for Charlotte Carroll. Loved having her on. Was very fun. Looking forward to Sunday. I mean, the prep is done, folks. You can find everything at The Athletic that we've done this week. Very proud of it. Have a lot more to come. So stay tuned for that. Fun podcast. Like I said at the top, you didn't listen to the conversation with Justin Jefferson. You guys probably know him well, and you'll like that conversation. I think he was really fun to talk to. I'm going to end it with this. I've got a reader who is always very kind. He's appreciative, and he asked me a question earlier this week. His name's Amir Eldomiati at SkyU Miko. What do you think the biggest advantage the Vikings will have over the Giants is? The easy answer here is Brian Flores' pressure against the Giants front. I mean, that Giants front, as Charlotte said, it's a lot of it's brand new. They haven't had a ton of continuity during training camp. New offensive line coach. So that's the obvious answer. But I guess the answer that maybe that I'll give is the Giants secondary against the Vikings receiving core. Shane Bowen, the Giants defensive coordinator, is interesting. In Tennessee, they mixed up coverages. They played man. They ran quarters. They ran cover three. They blitzed all when they needed to. I mean, I looked at even like their tendencies on third and short, and it's like some man, some zone. It's hard to really get a feel for what he's going to do. But I just think from a personnel perspective, Deontay Banks and Adoree Jackson having to stick with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. We'll see about Jalen Naylor kind of maybe by Friday, the time you're listening to this, we know. But I just think they're going to have a very hard time. Tyler Nubin, good player, enjoyed watching him in college, and I think he'll help them. Drew Phillips, I think a nickel corner from Kentucky. I like him too, but I just don't. I think that group, as long as the Vikings can protect, which is a question with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, but as long as they can protect, the Vikings can protect Sam Darnold and give him just a couple beats, I just think the Giants are going to have a very hard time closing space down the field. So that's the answer I'll give. But those are the obvious advantages. Brian Flores against Daniel Jones in that offensive line, and then Kevin O'Connell in the pass game against this Giants secondary. So with that, the work is done, and we finally will have a game to talk about. If you didn't listen on Thursday, the plan I think is going to be we'll do a Monday reaction. I'll synthesize some stuff for about a day, then get into it, and then a game preview on Wednesday and some live stuff and Q&A stuff mixed in. But as always, appreciate you guys listening. It's been a blast. We'll keep it rolling on the Alec Lewis Show early next week. Enjoy this weekend. Enjoy the heck out of the game. Follow on Twitter for updates if you need them at Alec_Lewis. And we will talk to you guys very, very soon.